Hi, this is Chris Marchand of Between the Songs podcast. I'm here with Joe Cook to tell you about another podcast we've created, and we hope, if you've enjoyed Between the Songs, that you'll enjoy this one too.
It's called Nostalgic Future Podcast, and that's what it's all about. Chris and I dive deep into our nostalgia, all the pop culture stuff that we grew up with, and we examine how it's influenced our lives and how that continues today and into the future.
So join us for fun discussions about some of our favorite movies, television shows, music, books. Really, nothing is off limits. We even have special guests on from time to time to talk about some of their nostalgic obsessions.
Check out Nostalgic Future Podcast, available now on all the big podcasting apps, and you can also follow us on social media. It's Nostalgic Future Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, and we're at Past Future Pod on Twitter.
Nostalgic Future Podcast, where the past is the only way forward.
Hey everybody, this is Andrew Greer, and you are listening to Between the Songs podcast.
Welcome to Rich Mullins Between the Songs podcast. Right now we have a bonus episode for you, and we're excited to be able to bring you an interview with author and musician Andrew Greer. He has written a new book on Rich Mullins, and it's a collaborative work written with interviews from tons of people that knew Mullins and that were inspired by Mullins. It's called Winds of Heaven, Stuff of Earth, taken from his third album. By the way, my name is Chris Marchand, and my co-host here is
Joe Cook.
Joe Cook. We're happy to be able to bring this to you. I mean, the thing is our proper episodes are dealing with Mullins' albums. However, this is quite a unique year. There's so much happening in Rich Mullins' releases and events that we just have to document it all. So in a little bit, I'm going to be able to explain how I was able to interview Andrew, and it was actually a lot of fun. But I was able to talk to him about the book that he wrote, as well as this tribute album that he is going to be recording sometime in the next year. It's a tribute album using Mullins' songs. So anyway, we're going to get to that in just a second. But this is a bonus episode. But there's a lot happening, even in our own camp. Actually, I feel kind of like I'm not doing so much. I'm doing the interviews. But Joe, you are an event. You are. You're like one of these guys. You work for Ticketmaster now or something. You know, you're a promo.
Part of the problem. I'm part of the problem.
You're part of the problem.
So anyway, we are putting on this event in Window Rock, and I have turned overnight into concert promoter, which is totally not something that I am all that familiar with. I've worked in radio for quite a few years, and I've been involved in putting on small events, little concerts here and there. But this is definitely the biggest scale thing that I've ever, been part of putting on. And that is part overwhelming and stressful and awesome all at the same time. And I'm pretty excited about some of the stuff we've got coming up in just a little over a month, Chris, out here in Window Rock, Arizona.
Yeah, so we're in the middle of August, and the event is September 16th. Yeah, so I want to say two things, and we're going to entice our listeners. One, there is the actual lineup, and we want to be able to tell you who's going to be there. But the other thing, the other aspect of this is that you need funding for it, and so we want to talk a little bit about how, if you feel led, if you feel called, there's a way for you to give and to support, to become a bit of a patron of this event, and to help you, Joe, in your ministry to bring it on. But anyway, we'll get to that in a second. Tell us what the event is going to be. What if people were to come, what should they expect?
Okay, so what this is going to be is a celebration of the life and legacy and the music of Rich Mullins. And here in Window Rock, the capital of the Navajo Nation, Rich did a lot of work out here throughout the 90s. He lived here just across the border in San Benito, New Mexico, which is actually where I live. He lived here for about 2 years, from 95 to 97, was really, really involved heavily in Navajo missions, and beyond Navajo missions, but also in the area, there's about 20 different Pueblo tribes, and the Hopi and the Zuni are nearby. Rich did a lot of work among Native peoples in this region, and so we are really excited to be able to put on this event in the capital of the Navajo Nation, Window Rock, at the Window Rock itself. So, I mean, which is just, if anybody's ever been here or not, if they've Googled it, it's just a beautiful location and a really important location to the Navajo people. We're going to be holding the concert at the Window Rock, and we've got friends of Rich's, guys that worked with him, professionally. His brother David Mullins is going to be joining us, and we've got some people that knew Rich from the area coming out as well. Who knew him during the time he lived here, and they're going to be sharing reflections about their memories of Rich. It's going to be a really great time, and we're really looking forward to doing this. We've got some great guests coming out. I will mention, if you're following it on the event page, we did have a couple cancellations that we sadly had to announce over the weekend. Jimmy Abegg and Ben Pearson had to cancel due to a scheduling conflict. I spoke with Jimmy about this. They really tried to work out something to make this happen, but they just couldn't make it happen. So that was a big bummer. On the bright side, we were able to announce that Andrew Osenga is going to be joining us. Now, I know that you're familiar with Andrew Osenga's work, Chris. He was a member of the band Caedmon's Call. Before that, he was like the founding member, lead singer of the Normals.
Of the Normals. I saw the Normals in my city, Peoria, the See You at the Flagpole, like concert event. The Normals came and played. They were just hitting it big.
Because they were from Illinois.
They were from Illinois, so they're from the city of Normal, which is about 45 minutes from us. So anyway, yes, I've kind of followed Osenga's career. I mean, I've known that he is a prolific musician and a prolific songwriter. Now, you and I, Joe, we're partial. We think that Osenga is one of the greater songwriters of this current generation of anybody, really.
Absolutely. And totally underrated, sadly, because he should be a household name because he's that good.
Yeah.
But that just how it kind of goes. We've had this conversation about people being sort of pigeonholed in the Christian music industry, but the guy's, like you said, a prolific musician, but prolific songwriter and producer as well. And in fact, this is kind of segues a little bit into what you're going to be talking about with Andrew Greer, because Andrew Osenga is co-producing that record that Andrew Greer is producing, the tribute album to Rich Mullins, coming out next year.
And so that's your connection. I mean, so people might be going, why did Joe invite Andrew Osenga? That seems kind of somewhat random, but that's the connection. He's going to be helping produce the album, the Rich Mullins tribute album.
Absolutely, and we had the conversations prior to this, and even he was really excited about the offer and the opportunity to come out here, and so we talked about it. We'd actually been kind of discussing this for months, but his sort of last question was, and he's a very gracious guy. It was sort of more concern for me. He goes, "Man, those guys you've got coming, Eric Hauk, Mitch McVicker, David Mullins, even some of the local guys, they knew Rich, they worked with him, they loved Rich." He said, "I was just a fan, a high school fan." And I go, "Well, you know what, man? I was just a high school fan. Chris, you were a high school fan. We didn't know Rich Mullins, but we were definitely influenced by Rich Mullins. And I thought it was really cool to have somebody who sort of." And I don't want to give away anything about your interview coming up, but Andrew Greer sort of talks about this in your interview with him, about what about that next generation of musicians that sort of came after Rich and the impact that he had on those artists. Well, I sort of look at Andrew Osenga as being from that sort of class, sort of that graduating class, kind of right after Rich Mullins. And so the influence is definitely there. Really excited to have him. Joining us for this. So I think it's going to be great. I'll mention, too, there's a couple things that we haven't announced online yet that are going to be happening. So this is a scoop right here on the podcast. one, we have just arranged. We're going to have a Navajo choir is going to be coming and performing at the event. The Ambassadors Choir from right here in our area is going to be joining us to sing some songs, and even doing a couple of Rich's songs. So it's going to be pretty neat. The other thing, for those who have been following this podcast, our last bonus episode was with Andrew Montanera on the LaCie Broadcasting petition for all that footage. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, LaCie Broadcasting out in Indiana has like 10 hours of footage of Rich that's almost all unreleased. And Andrew had this petition up. People signed the petition to try to have this footage preserved, digitized, and hopefully released. Well, we mentioned on the last episode that the footage has been digitized. It has not been released as of this podcast. But what I can say is that LaCie is going to allow us to show some of that never-before-seen footage of Rich at our event in Window Rock.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's a great honor to be able to do that.
It is. It's pretty cool, and so my understanding is that publicly it'll be the first time that any of this has ever been seen. So it's pretty cool. I'm excited about that. We are planning to have a video screen there and have some footage of Rich and maybe some more stuff even beyond the LaCie things. So pretty cool stuff happening out here in Window Rock.
Yeah.
And it is totally open to the public. This is a free event. We want you to be able to come out and enjoy this. It's really for the Navajo Nation, for the community here who knew and loved Rich during those years in the late 90s. And that's who we're doing it for and where we're doing it. But it's totally open to the public, and I know people are flying out to this show or driving in. You're coming in for it, Chris. And
I am. I will be there. Well, do we want to mention that we plan to record a pre-concert podcast? Do we want to mention that?
Absolutely. Yes, and that's one of the cool things about this. I think one of the things I'm most excited about is that we're going to be doing a live taping of Between the Songs prior to the concert. So the concert itself is going to start roughly around 6:30, ish. At 5 o'clock, we're going to open it up to anybody who wants to come out early. We are going to be interviewing some of the guests that night who just kind of have a Q&A with them and some of the other folks in the area that knew and worked with Rich. And so it's going to be kind of I don't know, it could be a madhouse, but it'll be great.
Well, so here's what's funny is that we started this podcast and we're like, you know what? Let's just talk about the albums. And now here we're going to have, like, let this be kind of a forewarning all of our listeners. We're going to have just a bunch of bonus episodes for the next couple of months.
It's true.
It's kind of funny.
We have way more bonuses than we are going to have regular episodes.
Yeah, by the end of it, we're just going to have, 40 bonus episodes and, 9 or 10 regular episodes, whatever it is. Anyway, what's neat about this is that, we'll be able to offer a live bonus episode in the middle of September, maybe towards the end of September by the time we get around to it. But that'll be this, and then we have a few more before the Window Rock event. We have a couple more bonus episodes coming your way. I guess we'll let you figure that out when they come your way. But
what did Beth Lutz? What did she coined the phrase? We're the Raga Media.
We are the Raga Media, and yes, and. We have sent our papers to the government, and that's our new tax ID number from the Raga Media Corp.
So don't even think about taking it.
Okay. You know who you are. Those people out there that would take the Raga Media trademark name. Yeah. Okay. Wait. Before we get too sidetracked, here's what I want to say. As Joe said, the Window Rock event is open to the public. Joe is wanting to put on an event that blesses people, that lets people remember Mullins and his music, and to give actually some people a unique concert going experience. It's free, but Joe does need support. He does need help, and so if you feel called, you feel led to donate to this event, please go to betweenthesongspodcast.com, go to our website, and then one of the main tabs is Support the Window Rock Tribute Concert. So please click on it. It gives you a couple of different ways. You can pay online. You could call the ministry. You could send a check in. It explains it there. Honestly, we are seriously asking. It does cost money to bring Mitch McVicker in and to bring David Mullins in. There's plane tickets. There's fees to Andrew Osenga. Everybody costs. And at the moment, Joe is just giving. But if you feel led, please consider going to Support Window Rock Tribute Concert on our website. Anything to add there, Joe?
Just that several people have already donated, and I just want to say thank you for that. It genuinely helps us to be able to cover some of these costs. I think most of the costs are with travel. It's not cheap to get to Window Rock. We're a little bit off the beaten path, and so but I think this is an important thing that we're doing for our community and for those who can come in. I know they're going to be blessed by attending. And so if this is just, if this is something that would be on your heart to do, it would sure mean a lot to us, and it would genuinely be a big help. And all the information, as Chris said, is right on the webpage at betweenthesongspodcast.com. Is that it?
Yes, betweenthesongspodcast.com.
I almost forgot our website.
There you go. That's all right. Yeah. So we would love to see you at the Window Rock event. Come join us. Support the event if you feel so called. But before we move on to this potential tribute album that's in the works and the book Winds of Heaven, Stuff of Earth, I do need to break in and mention our sponsor, St. Rich Beard Oil. Yes. Hopefully you have now been made aware of St. Rich Beard Oil. Yes, Joe, through the Skype line, Joe is showing me that his beard is in fact coming in, and I think he's getting ready to use the beard oil. Now, Matt Walden,
excited.
I've just, honestly, people have given me beard, things before, like pomade or, like the kind of the gooey substances, and they've given me stuff. I just don't know what to do with it. So I need the founder of St. Rich Beard Oil. I need Matt Walden to help me to understand how to use this. I'm hoping I will do a beard oil apprenticeship with him someday, and so that I can know what I'm supposed to do with it. Nonetheless, I need to say this week Matt was sending me updates, pictures of him making the beard oil in his home, and you know what he told me? This is an exclusive. What I'm going to tell you right now. He told me he bought 2 big bottles of patchouli oil, or whatever the patchouli scent is, and one of those bottles spilled all over his car. And I said, your car is never going to smell normal again. And you know what he said? I'm totally fine with that. He was okay with that. Now,
his car has the essence of Rich Mullins.
His car smells like Rich Mullins. He'll never get away from it. So, yes, it is true. I have not smelled the St. Rich Beard Oil yet. Matt will eventually send it our way. But he attempts, and I really want to take it all in. So I'm really looking forward to it coming my way. But he attempts to get the essence of Rich Mullins. So please, again, go to our website and click on the St. Rich Beard Oil tab. By the way, Matt Walden does want us to let you know that he messaged David Mullins himself and asked him, hey man, is this okay that I'm doing this? And since Matt has promised to give any kind of profit to AdoreMinistries.com, and so David was okay with that, the fact that Matt is not making money off of this, but he's giving it to a ministry. So anyway, please check out our website, and you can purchase it. It's a real thing, and if anything, for the Rich Mullins fan, I would want to purchase it for the bottle. The bottle has a beautiful, hand-drawn image of Mullins. It's cool. It's a cool thing.
The bottle's awesome, and you've seen the painting, right?
And there's an original painting. I'll get that on the website soon. There's a beautiful icon. It's done as like a classic icon of Rich Mullins. Some might find it sacrilegious. I find it beautiful, but
it's really cool.
It's really, really neat. Okay. Joe, do you want me to get into my experience at Escape to the Lake?
Yeah, man, you you made us all jealous last week off on your little adventure, and I'm just dying to hear about it.
So, a couple of weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago, or a month ago, I got a message from Dave Trout. And Dave Trout is, I don't know what we call him, the president, the head of UTR Media, or what was known as Under the Radar Media. And he messaged me. He said, do you want to come to Escape to the Lake? I know you're a Mullins fan. I mean, he knows that we're doing the podcast. Come to our event. You can hang out with some of the artists. We're having a Rich Mullins tribute concert. Da-da-da-da. Would you want to come? And so, I figured out with my wife, is this even doable with our time? And so I hightailed it up to Cedar Lake, Indiana. I think it's a town. I think the town itself is called Cedar Lake, but it's this beautiful resort up there. That's a place called Cedar Lake Ministries, and that's where Dave holds the event. I think this is the second year he's had it there. He's had it at other places before. And Joe, have you been to Escape the Lake before? I can't remember.
I have not.
Okay.
This is, this is something I've been following for quite a few years. I'm a huge UTR fan. No exaggeration to say that about 5-6 years ago, I probably was this close to just being done with contemporary Christian music.
Mm-hmm.
And then discovered Under the Radar,
mm-hmm.
and it sort of redeemed the genre for me,
mm-hmm.
And opened a world of new artists to me, and just kind of reignited my love for Christian music. And so I'm a huge fan. I just personally just love what Dave is doing. And last year I was honored to join their critics panel. Which, in fact, if you follow them on Facebook, they just released their list of best albums and songs of the first half of 2017, and I got to contribute to that. But no, I've never been to Escape to the Lake, just never been able to make it up there
mm-hmm.
for it,
mm-hmm.
and so was so totally jealous of you.
Yeah, I mean, so the weird thing about Escape to the Lake is if you know some of these indie Christian artists, like, you can just kind of hang out with them. It was really weird. It was just like, the access to the artists was it was just amazing. I mean, you could just kind of hang out, talk with them, converse with them. I mean, there's a whole slew of people that I got to meet that I was just like, I can't believe, it's not as if, and they know this, if these indie Christian artists are listening, they know they're not the most famous people in the world, but, some of the people that were there, they have long established careers. They've been around quite a long time.
And they've had some names out there, too. I mean, like, bigger names. Jason Gray has done Escape to the Lake.
Okay.
Last year, I think they had Burlap to Cashmere. Maybe that was 2 years ago.
Really? That's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But the one thing, whether it's a well-known artist or a not-so-well-known artist, they get some great artists in, solid,
That's
great
right.
singer-songwriters and bands, and it's sort of, if you're into indie Christian music, Escape to the Lake is the place to be.
Absolutely. And, okay, so let me tell you, I, hurried my way up there, I dropped my kids off at my mother-in-law's, and try to, zoom my way up to Cedar Lake, and I find my way to the resort, and I'm like, does anybody know where Dave Trout's at? And they direct me to this conference room, seminar room, and as I go into I had no idea what I was walking into, but there Dave Trout was. I had never met Dave before. We just messaged back and forth, but in the same room there is Jimmy Abegg just sitting down in the room. And then right next to Jimmy Abegg is Andrew Greer. And now, again, we've interviewed Jimmy, and I've seen Andrew because if you know anything about Andrew Greer, he works for CCM Magazine, the online version, and he does all these like really long interviews with really famous Christian artists. And so I've seen Andrew. I'm familiar with his stuff. Anyway, it was just so crazy. Like there they were.
I don't think I've ever asked you prior to this. Had you ever met Jimmy before?
I don't think I have. Not met him. Yeah, I don't think I had. It just hadn't happened.
Up till recently, I mean, I got to spend some time with Jimmy in Nashville, but up till then, I'd met him, but only, like those, real quick handshake, how you doing, Mr. Abegg,
Yes,
kind of thing.
yes.
But,
well,
That was pretty much the extent for me.
Yeah, I mean, let me say this: like, Jimmy is such a sweet guy, and that's the thing that just everybody kept saying. You know, everyone knows Jimmy's going blind, and so when I walked into the room and Dave Trout like said my name, Jimmy heard Dave say that, and he's like, "Oh, is that Chris Marchand?" I mean, like I couldn't believe that Jimmy remembered my name. That was just astounding. So he was just really sweet, and so here's what happened. What I had walked into was this panel discussion. It was the quote unquote producers panel session, and so it was all about like advice to up and coming artists, how to produce your own album. So it was really neat. Like right from the get go, I get to sit down, and there was like 5 other artists, and I got to hear, you know, some of their recording advice and just their experience and their insight into the industry. So that in and of itself was just amazing. I love that. So my day was a whirlwind. I didn't actually spend the night there, so it was just like this jam-packed day. But from there, I kind of got to sit in on a little sound check with the Rich Mullins tribute concert that was going on that evening. So there was a lot of sound check stuff. But then Andrew Greer, he was gracious enough. He gave me a half an hour or so of his time. So we jetted out after the quick sound check, had our interview, and then I might say what I'm going to say next maybe is one of the highlights of my life was after the Rich Mullins tribute concert sound check. Jimmy needed to do some more rehearsing, and so they found a place on some porch in front of their dormitory, like where everybody was staying.
I know what you're going to tell me right now, and you Facebook messaged me when this was happening.
Yeah.
And the Facebook message gave me chills.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was Jimmy Abegg, who is one of my heroes, and he's just his music is just wonderful. And he's sitting there rehearsing on a porch with Ben Pearson. So, if anybody knows who Ben Pearson is, he's the guy that has taken the most iconic Rich Mullins photographs, and he's the guy that was the cinematographer on Mullins' videos. I don't know if he did Brothers Keeper. Did he do Brothers Keeper? I think he might have.
I don't know if, that's funny. I don't know if Ben was involved in that or not. I know Jimmy was. Jimmy,
maybe it was Jimmy.
The Brothers Keeper. But it might have been Jimmy and Ben.
It might have been Jimmy. Well, I should have asked him. But so Ben did all the Liturgy Legacy videos, and Steve Taylor was the director. And so if you follow Steve Taylor's films, Ben Pearson is Steve Taylor's cinematographer. They are a team. They work together. So I'm sitting on this.
And Ben also worked on the Homeless Man video.
Ah, okay. So Ben is a guy that's been present for a lot of great things in Rich Mullins' art as well. And so then also a band that you know and love, the Mosleys were part of Jimmy's side band. So they were backing him up. And then the drummer and the singer from the band Four Brothers. So Jimmy had kind of thrown together this makeshift band, and I got to sit in and just watch them rehearse. And one of my favorite songs that Jimmy does is called "The Dream," off of his Secrets album. And it was just, just sitting there like the acoustic kind of raw version. It was just beautiful. I just loved it.
And it's really, it's a narration, really.
It's a narrative song. He doesn't really sing very much. Anyway, it was just great. All right, so,
so Chris got to hang on a porch listening to Jimmy practice The Dream.
I'm living the life.
You were living the dream.
I was living the dream. That train was coming for me. The train was coming for me. For me. That is so inside. Yeah, there you go. Well, go listen to the song. Go listen to Jimmy's The Dream. It's a good song. Okay, so the rest of my time was kind of a whirlwind. It was kind of a lead up to the concert at night. And, I have said before that I don't really like cover songs. I like it when I come to like an artist. I just want their song in my head. I don't need someone to redo it. And so I raise a stink about it. And I actually got to interview Dave Trout later on in that evening, and he brought up to me. He said, "I know you don't like tribute concerts, and I know you don't like tribute albums and cover songs." He brought up to me, so it was kind of funny to be able to talk and banter back and forth with him about that. But guess what? The tribute concert, it won me over. So the opening song, and I didn't realize it had already been recorded. was
Yeah, 'cause-
Andy Goolahorn's version of Peace off of Liturgy Legacy. And it was...
And I get a message from Chris. Man, Andy Gullahorn just did this amazing version of Peace, and I'm just at home shaking my head.
Yeah.
Going,
I don't
Chris.
listen to cover songs. I just don't care. But he won me over. So Goolahorn won me over.
And we should say that was released on the David Leo Schultz
Yes.
tribute album. It was
There
the
you
one
go.
for the soundtrack to Ragamuffin.
Yes. So go check out the soundtrack to Ragamuffin.
Which, by the way, is a really good album. There's some really good stuff on that record.
You know what? I'll just have to go find out, won't I? I don't have it.
We'll have to do an episode on it.
There you go. Episode 243 will be on that. So anyway, the rest of the night was great. The Mosleys played. Jimmy did his own solo set, his first solo set of his own songs in like 20 years, which was just an honor to be able to be there for that and see that. I don't know what to say. The Mosleys were great. There was this guy, he goes by Son of Laughter. He did a great version of The Color Green. It reminded me of like if Nick Drake were to do The Color Green. Like that's what the Son of Laughter's version of The Color Green was. It was really quite haunting.
You know
Quite
what? It's
haunting.
interesting that you brought that up because I had a really brief conversation this past Monday with Jimmy. It was actually when he called to tell me that they were having the scheduling problems
Yeah.
for Window Rock. But we talked a little bit about Escape to the Lake, and he told me that was the highlight of the show for him, Son of Laughter's Color Green.
Really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, he said he loved
It was haunting. He slowed it down a little bit, and just the way that he finger picked it on guitar. It was something. He's got it on tape. I hear they're going to actually release the video of it on Facebook or somewhere. Oh boy, it's right around the anniversary of Mullins' death. They're going to release it, so we will be able to listen to the songs and view it. So that's coming. Expect that from Under the Radar. So anyway, fast forward. Long story short, it actually they won me over. It was a great tribute to Mullins, and they played some clips, and Andrew Greer led us in some worship of Mullins' worship songs at the end, and it was beautiful. It really was. Jill Phillips was there singing with Andy Goolahorn. It was great. Now here's what I want to say. I want to talk about Andrew Greer's book, so we're going to talk about that. But I do have to say something really quickly. This is important. What I'm going to say. So. It's really late at night. I've done an interview with the Mosleys, which you can expect on Post Consumer Reports at some time.
And by the way, let me just say,
interject. Yes,
the Mosleys.
Yeah,
they have a record that just recently came out that actually Jimmy played on their album.
That's right. There you go.
And I think Phil Madeira's on that record too.
I think Phil produced it and played, and then Jimmy also played.
And it is a phenomenal album, and it's called Ordinary Time.
Yeah.
And just go give that record a listen. You won't be disappointed. I included it on my list of the best of UTR's best of 2017 so far. And I also picked one of the songs from that record called Settle. That is just a beautiful, beautiful song.
Yeah.
I just want to give them a cheap plug right now. If anybody's listening, we should put a link on the website. Check out the Mosleys' new album. It is well worth your time.
There you go. And look for my own interview on Post Consumer Reports. I got to hang out with them, which is really cool. So I got done interviewing them, and so Rachel Mosley was hanging around, and all of a sudden Dave Trout was there, and then in walks Nick Flora. Now, Nick Flora, are you familiar with Nick Flora?
I sure am, yeah.
He's a sarcastic, witty guy. He likes to have fun, and so I just kind of introduced myself to him, and we were just all kind of hanging around, and somebody brings up Carmen. And so
now you're skipping ahead to season 2.
Yeah, season 2 of Between the Songs. So it's getting so late. It's like almost 1 o'clock. I'm like, I need to get home. It's going to be like 2:30 in the morning. But here we are for like the next half an hour. We're like watching Carmen's new President Trump Blues video. We're like reading through all the comments on Carmen's page, like people saying, "Carmen, you are anointed of God," and da da da. And so we were. Nick Flora was like freaking out. He was like, "I can't believe this," like he was irate at Carmen. It was just hilarious. So I couldn't leave because I was just enjoying watching everyone like gawk at Carmen's like piece of work. His 200,000 GoFundMe project.
How much does he have raised for that so far?
I have not checked it in a couple of weeks. My guess is
it was over $100,000, right?
Yeah, it was over. Yeah, he has funded over $100,000 for sure. Well, anyway, whatever. So I eventually did make my way home. So he's Carmen, man, and he is now a certified personal trainer, life coach. Not personal trainer, but life coach. Anyway, okay, let's talk about the book. You want to talk about the book?
That's a whole another bonus episode right there.
Yeah. So I knew about this book that Andrew Greer was working on, but we don't know what it looks like, so we didn't know what was in it. And so it was just really great to be able to sit down with him and be able to ask him kind of like, give me kind of the scoop on what's in this book. And through it, Joe, were you able to get a copy of the book yourself?
I was, a digital copy.
Yeah, I have a digital copy. And looking through it, it's a beautiful book. The way that I would describe it is a series of reflections, and he organizes it around different themes. But he interviewed so many different people. It's quite a lovely tribute. Really, it is.
And I'll say this about it, looking through it. You and I had some reservations on this book because we'd been hearing things about it, and and you sort of brought this up in the interview, so I won't delve into that. But there were kind of rumors about this book that we had some concerns. Mm-hmm. I will say that the concerns that I had they're still sort of present in the book, but overall, I would say that 99% of this book is really nice, mm-hmm. and they did a beautiful job. The layout is nice. Even just, the people they talked to were great. Mm-hmm. Some of the reflections. I haven't read the whole thing yet.
I haven't either. I would say for me the highlights are Dave McCracken's reflection and Mark Lowry's reflection. You get to hear his, his cruise, Rich Mullins on a cruise, getting stuck on an island and renting scooters. You get to hear his story, which was great. It was really great.
The other thing about this book, and I'll say this, is that we've all sort of seen those iconic photographs of mm-hmm. Rich Mullins a mm-hmm. million times. In this book, there are a lot of pictures. I've only ever seen one or two of them before. Yeah. It was mostly photographs that I have never seen, including one really nice photo of Rich out here on the Navajo reservation about a week before he died. Really cool photograph.
And there are, I haven't not taken a close enough look at these yet, but there are scans of journal entries and notes that he took. Have you seen those?
Yeah, and lyrics to songs too. And there's
handwritten lyrics to songs. So not only are there new reflections and new stories that we've never heard, but there's like some artifacts that Greer and his editors or whoever, they really helped pull it all together. Randy Cox is part of it. So.
Yeah, and you can tell they put a lot of heart and soul into the finished product. It really came out nice.
Yeah. So here's what we want to say. We're gonna jump right into Andrew's interview. Half an hour intro. That's all right. That's short for us. A half an hour intro. We're gonna get into Andrew's interview. My interview with Andrew. But Joe and I have a couple of more reflections after the interview. So if you want to stick around, you can listen to another 10 minutes of us. Going back and forth about the book itself. But here's what I want to say. You can pre-order the book. And if you go to windsofheavenstuffofearth.com, you can pre-order it. It does come out, like September 5th. That's when it comes out. But if you pre-order it, you actually get to listen, to watch a 50-minute interview that Andrew did with David Mullins. So there's some exclusives if you pre-order the book. So go check that out.
Let's get to the interview. Let's make this our shortest episode ever. I got a message from Dave Trout. He was listening to our last episode. He goes, "Hey, I'm listening to the podcast. I'm 2/3 the way through." I'm like, man, you really made it that far.
Yes. So hey everyone that's listening. We know that our podcast, our last episode, was almost 3 hours long. We are aware. We know what we're doing. Right?
We own it.
We own it. Okay. So here now, please check out windsofheavenstuffofearth.com to look at and maybe pre-order Andrew Greer's new book on Rich Mullins. And let's go to that interview now. I'm going out to this Window Rock event. Are you familiar with what's going on out there at all?
I'm not totally familiar with all the details of it, but heard that.
Mm-hmm. And Dave Mullins is going to be out there. And one of the questions I want to ask him, because I know he's a sweet guy, he's a nice guy, is, hey man, are you okay still talking about your brother? Like, are you kind of done? You just wish you could move on? You know?
Yeah.
I think it's probably different for a guy like you, because you're like, how old are you, by the way?
Yeah, I'm 34.
34, so I'm 35. You know, we're that generation that
age,
we kind of grew up on Mullins. Would you say you grew up on Mullins?
Yeah, I would say definitely, because, you know, when we were around, 10, 11 is when Liturgy, Legacy, Ragmuff Band, which that is the time that I began to really consume music, you know, for myself, like choose my own music and begin to actually purchase my own music. So that's really when I started sinking my teeth into it. And I had lots of different tastes. I loved pop music, I loved Motown, I loved black gospel, and my mother had bought a copy of the Liturgy Legacy Ragamuffin Band because she loved the song Hold Me Jesus. Who knows where she didn't listen to Christian radio or anything like that, so she must have just heard it through something, or maybe while flipping the stations. And I remember, of course, she said, it was interesting, she gave me the CD because she said, I bought this for Hold Me Jesus, but I don't really necessarily, I'm not drawn to the record. So she wasn't that interested by the record.
It's like the radio single, you know, it's like the...
Kind of, yeah. And she loves tender songwriting and not necessarily a lot of production. She's also a classical organist. So she loved some of the epicness of it, but she just, anyway, for whatever reason, it didn't totally compel her, and she thought I might love it. Well, I've always loved the sounds of Americana and folk, and so there, of course, were other songs on it, The Color Green, Here in America, et cetera, that made an impact on me. Though I wouldn't say I became a huge Rich aficionado at that point in time, because his next record was Brother's Keeper, which was harder to sink your teeth into on the same level.
Very Americana, but not as tight.
Less produced, and, well, not as produced as tightly, correct. The songs also, I think, were not quite... Maybe it was the production, actually, but I don't know. Reed Arvin, Rich's original producer, who produced every record up through Liturgy Legacy, was only... not only, but he was not... It was Rich and the Ragamuffins that produced Brothers Keeper. Reed Arvin became executive producer just to make sure that ship sailed, you know. And really, I think what I've heard, Mike Blanton, who was manager at that time and over Reunion, and who really helped bring Rich up into, you know, the spotlight, I guess you could say. And then, of course, Don Donahue, who was his A&R and really his kind of chief pal from an industry standpoint, at that time said what happened is Brothers Keeper lost the rudder. Reed was a rudder. Reed was a commercial rudder. And getting to know Reed now, and Reed and I and Andrew Peterson and Jason Gray and Andrew Osenga are working on a potential Rich Mullins tribute's a terrible word to say, you know, but a project to bring his songs into a new generation. And I asked Reed kind of, I think boldly, because what idiot would ask Reed Arvin, who was the producer of these really, you know, benchmark records, not just for Rich, but in Christian music, especially in singer-songwriter Christian music, would ask him if he would produce, you know, help co-produce this record.
So you asked Reed to help co-produce it?
I did, and he is.
See, that sounds bold. Because from what I interviewed him for the liturgy. At the 20th anniversary, I reached out to him.
Okay.
I interviewed him. It got published at
Very articulate.
Today.
Yes. Oh, great.
It was on their website. It wasn't published in the physical, but it was on their website.
That's it. Yeah.
And I said, "Do you play music anymore?" He's like, "No." I was kind of like,
yes.
"What?" I'm, you know, it's hard to tell when you listen to those records. Like, well, who's playing what? But I know he's playing so many of those.
Well,
keys.
he's a keys player, right? And he started. You know, he and Rich. Do you know how he and Rich got together? Did he tell you that? It was Amy. Reed was literally on the road during Amy's kind of first heyday, playing these arena gigs with keys. And Mike Blanton, who was Amy's manager and Rich's manager at Reunion Records, just paired that. Just said, I think he saw in Rich this kind of wild and free artist, knew that Reed had some of the technical ability as well as the love for artistic things, product. And sure enough, it apparently, according to Reed, it really did just sink in, though it was very difficult. He said, I never produced a record. He was learning to make records as Rich was learning to make records. He probably talked about that.
Well, and so we're hoping to interview him for like more of a recorded one because we want to go through every one of the albums. We want to hear what he has to say. And
I think he'd love to.
Yeah, he said he would. I just have to get back with him. But he's just like, do you really want to interview me about those first 2 albums? Like,
yeah, Reed, I can't speak for him. You'll have to speak to him. I think the industry thing, he just, as it evolved, he evolved out of it. And I don't know that was any cynicism or hard feelings, but I feel really honored. This project still has to come to light, so there's always the chance it doesn't. You're welcome to talk about it because it should be, out in spring or early summer next year. So it's not that far away. And but what we decided to do was how could we actually do a record that wasn't just a tribute. Those have been done, kind of like the book that I wrote. The question was, does it need to be written? Question of the record, does it need to be recorded?
It's a good question.
The tributes have been done, right? So I would say the same thing for the record, that this can, piggyback or actually set us in motion into the book, since that's more concrete at this point in time. Worthy Publishing, which is a larger publishing house in Nashville that's had a lot of success recently, came to me. I was in the process of writing another book for them, and someone brought them the idea of the Rich Mullins book. They had some new lyrics of he is Richard, but I don't know. I've never called him Richard in my life until just now. But had some new, Wayne is actually what his family called him, Richard Wayne Mullins. But he had some newer lyrics of Rich's that he wondered if there was a platform for that, and around the 20th anniversary. So last November, which is a quick time frame, November 2016, Worthy came to me and said, could we put this as a priority, and would you be willing to do it? Now, I have some background in journalism. I have some background in conversations, hosting those, interviewing people, and they knew I'd done a lot of that for some publications like Christianity Today, CCM Magazine, of course, which deals specifically with gospel music artists, and who had covered Rich's career very well in the 10, 15 years that he was producing records. So they said, would you be willing to write this? I said, why do we need to write it? I'm not sure what we're writing. And they said, well, we're not sure either. Let's talk about that.
Might I ask, is this Randy?
Randy Cox. Have you talked to Randy?
I've not talked with him. I just heard was he the catalyst behind the book and
he was the first voice with Worthy to really say, because of course he was one of the early publishers of Rich's song. He really helped develop it as he was a part of Meadow Green Publishing. Yeah. As a part of that era, he really, alongside Reunion and Mike Blanton, helped. He probably, I can't remember all the history, but Randy and Mike, et cetera, really helped usher Rich's songs into Amy's world, which then ushered Rich into this development deal with Reunion, and then, kind of set the wheels in motion. So Randy was an early part of that for sure, from a song perspective. And he still is a song guy. That's what he does in Nashville. So a peer of Rich's, really. They're probably the same age. Randy brought that idea to Worthy. Worthy came to me. And so that's how it happened. And so you'll see Randy's name, of course, on the products, too. Yeah. He really was the genesis.
Was it going to be a book and an album?
There's been so many evolutions of this, and of course Jimmy Abegg has his wonderful products that he's in the middle of working on, and that in 2018 I think you'll see those come to light that are more niche for sure, really for the Rich diehards. Yeah. We were working with a mainstream publisher essentially. Right. Is like, okay, we can't just be narrow in our focus. We really need to let it blossom. I think the record that Reed and AP and Andrew and Jason and I are working on is really the partner to this book.
Okay, so if you can, tell me about that record. First, I'm curious about that, because I definitely have questions about the book. But I know more about what's in the book, a little bit more, right? Because I've read the website. But what's this record you're talking about?
So, kind of telling it here first.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I have been involved in conversations with Dave Trout of UTR Media. Dave originally, as part of one of his Kickstarter campaigns with his UTR listening audience, had a stretch goal that would produce a Rich Mullins, pretty much acoustic EP kind of record.
And they didn't quite make it at the time, right?
Right. But Dave still had they did stretch their goal and overextended what he wanted originally. And so he had that earmarked, set aside for this Rich thing. Yeah. And then he started talking to me, knowing I was doing the book, and could that correspond? He would talk to Andrew Osenga some and Andrew Peterson naturally. Andrew Peterson, I think, really he and Dave in their conversations had just said, what could this be? Not just what can it be, but really what could it be? That conversation is what has continued to evolve. I don't know if everyone was really totally... I don't know if even AP was like... I think everyone had reservations because... kind of like my reservations about the book. What hasn't already been done and why do we need to do it again? Reed's reservation about the record, is like... He said this to me, which I thought was pretty monumental. He said, my last production credit with Rich in his music was Liturgy Legacy Ragamuffin Band. I have to think really hard about whether I want to have another imprint on that music and legacy. This would be the next thing, which is enormous from a historical and musical standpoint. So to have Reed a part of that, I'm really... So the way this has kind of congealed, it has been that. It's been a natural adding of ingredients and conversations, and then Andrew Sang and I were going to co-produce it. We were taking it to labels, and labels were interested in town because we really wanted it to extend to this generation of artists to say, hey, gospel music has been influenced because of Rich's songs, his life, his legacy, the way he conducted his life, how that poured into his lyrics, the production elements of it. All that has really been an inspiration for when you look at people like Andrew Peterson and Sarah Groves and Jason Gray and Sarah Hart and, you see all these people who really were personally influenced by his music. Well, those are the people we want to... The tribute records had Amy Grant on it, had Michael W. Smith, had Ashley Cleveland, had Jimmy Abegg, all of those really wonderful key players during Rich's career. But what about the artists whose careers came after he died? And so really... You're talking about a direct influence just through what we consumed and observed and not through living life alongside him. It's different, And could these songs like If I Stand and, and Hold Me, Jesus, and even things like maybe a touch of Step by Step or Awesome God, could they live in a new generation, because they really were forerunners unknowingly of modern worship, but they have made their way out. I heard a really interesting conversation with Rich that he was doing with Rick Tarrant of 20 The Countdown magazine. Do you remember that?
Sure. Maybe I've heard it at some point, probably.
Yeah, and they did a really wonderful special after he died, collected all those conversations they did with him, and they asked about Awesome God, and they were saying, I think that's a song that's going to be like my kids and their kids, and Rich said, it has a shelf life of 15 to 20 years.
Yeah.
It's fairly correct.
Yeah.
Except that things come back. Anything that's been in the hymnody of the church, which some of his songs have become, have an opportunity to live on because they're already living.
Well, I'm a worship leader at my church. I'm the music pastor, and I really like Rich Mullins, and so it's up to me if I'm going to sing it on a Sunday morning. And so every now and then, I'll do step by step, sometimes by step. I just did, we follow the lectionary, and so I just did Jacob and Two Women.
Oh, yeah.
And because it came up in that passage from Genesis.
Yeah.
And so this is the first time I ever did that.
Yeah.
But
well, Rich painted so many pictures. And
exactly.
As I learned through really delving to his life for the book, really loved Scripture. Though he was a torn man, his humanity, he had this real kind of almost conservatism, it seemed like, with Scripture, yet it didn't lead him to a conservative lifestyle. I think that's interesting because so much we've paired an honor of Scripture and corporate fellowship with some kind of conservative way of life, and I'm not really sure that's Christ-like. So, of course, that depends how you define conservative. And that's semantics. But anyway, and we're talking about more than politics, of course, and I think that was the beauty of Rich, too, went way beyond politics. So to the record conversation.
Are you saying that the Under the Radar tribute record is what you're working on?
It will be a part of that. So UTR is a part of it.
Because I know they're going to launch a podcast about it.
And that is a part of the making of this record.
Okay.
So yes, so it's not. It has grown beyond just explicitly being a UTR record.
Okay.
But
So
UTR is part of it.
co-sponsor or something like that.
Yeah,
You know, just
UTR is
partnering
essentially
with
one
it.
of the imprints, the labels of it.
So it's gotten-
and Dave is still a big part of it. Mhm.
So it's gotten bigger than Dave's original intent.
Yeah,
which is cool,
we
which is
asked
cool.
Dave, could we go with that? You
Yeah.
know, instead of do something different and you do that, could we meld these things together? I think you'll see some UTR artists make appearances on there that maybe wouldn't have if it didn't have UTR's imprint
Right,
on
there
it,
you
which
go,
I think is
there you go,
brilliant.
there you go, yeah.
But most of the artists you're talking about anyway, if you think about even the ones involved, me, Andrew Osenga, and Jason Gray, Andrew Peterson, UTR artists. So
yeah.
it naturally felt that way.
There you go. I mean, so
But maybe Ellie Holcomb, maybe Sarah Groves for sure,
Okay,
maybe Jill and Andy. You know, like there are people that you can imagine start naming who we
I'm sure
probably
that's
want to be a part of it.
still in the works.
All those in the
probably,
works.
right?
We haven't actually officially asked anybody.
Okay.
What we know is the five of us
Yeah.
with Dave being a part of that.
What I'm a little curious of, and we'll get to the book, is do you have any other ideas? You're like, well, here's what I would do if I did a Rich Mullins,
For a record?
Yeah, like have you talked about any of the direction it might take?
We definitely want to stay true to what Reed felt Rich where he was going with his musicianship. I think he and Reed, if I'm correct, he and Reed had some conversations right before he died because I think Rich was wanting to pull Reed back into the fold of production because he knew he needed that rudder, and so he was looking. Yeah, he knew he needed that rudder, and he was looking to bring that back in. But he definitely wanted to keep it more definitively Americana, folk. He didn't want CCM to take over his records, and so Reed really wanted us to keep that in mind and to honor that is probably one of the ways Reed would want to be involved is that it would be a continuation. Well, I think that's very natural, an Americana folk thing for us, but it's good to keep in mind because we will have some commercial things in mind too. That's part of Jason Gray's involvement.
Okay.
He has the most commercial ear out of all of us while still being rootsy.
Okay.
So, yeah, it'll have a rootsy feel, but it's also not going to be just stripped down. We're going to allow production to have a hand.
Yeah.
Because those were Rich's records. Rich's records were not stripped down.
Yeah, no, they weren't.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Do you hear all that? The Irish, junk and everything in there and the strings. It was still using the Nashville string machine and stuff just like every other record was in town, from country to Christian music during the time. So production was an element of what we love about Rich, whether we want to admit that or not.
I think it's great. Yeah. I wouldn't. I love the biggest produced stuff. Maybe not the '80s produced stuff, but
I think you might see, with our conversation about Beth Lutz and stuff, I think you might see a couple demos pop in too.
As your version of some of the demos,
as a part of production. I don't know.
Okay. you have a look on your face. Like
We'll just see.
you're hiding a secret.
We'll just see what it is, but I think you'll hear some Rich on it.
Oh, I see.
Some Rich firsthand.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. I'm not sure I know much more than that.
I think I know what that means, I will just imagine until it actually happens, right?
Yeah, we'll do this again.
You told me earlier. I'm a doer. I'm a maker. So I leave it. I put it in your lap.
Yeah, but we like to complete. Yeah, I put this on tape. This will be completed. I don't know when or what, but we hope a documentary to go along with it too.
Interesting. Yeah.
So that might kind of start along with Andrew Peterson's event at the Ryman that we're all a part of, and we'll see. We'll see.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like you brought Reed Arvin out of semi-retirement, that's a big deal to me. It's like, what?
Well, don't tell him that. I don't want to scare him off yet.
Okay. Never mind.
You can tell your audience that. Don't tell Reed.
I'll just say
I'm letting Reed just pretend he's playing right now. He's just having fun.
He's just having fun. Okay, so the book is interesting too. It's not a biography. It's not an academic text. It's to me, it seems like a bunch of reflections. Is there anything else? What do you want to say about it?
Well, it's called Winds of Heaven, Stuff of Earth, which we just couldn't get past that title. We had titles that were, of course, not any of his song or album titles, and we just thought, oh my gosh, when you think about Rich and these writings. So the subtitle, as it often does, explains the book, and it's how you've explained it well. Spiritual conversations inspired by the life and lyrics of Rich Mullins. Now, Rich is all over this book. He's on the cover of the book, photos of him with some of the contributors in the book, but they are short snippets. So the book is a pretty extensive book, 3 sections, 50 or so chapters because they're bite-sized chapters. You could literally pick up and read something like a devotional reading, but they're not devotionals. You could pick it up and read it, kind of like a 1,200 word something, read it, put it down, come back to it 2 weeks later, and you could still pick up in the next chapter. They're kind of these little bites and nuggets of what Rich was leaving us, and we want to continue. I did that with about a dozen or so more contributors as well, who contributed their own words as some of those chapters. People like Carolyn Ahrens, who was so associated with him back in the day, and Ashley Cleveland. But then artists who are more in the spotlight today, people like Brandon Heath, Andrew Peterson, Jason Gray, of course, Sarah Groves, Jars of Clay is kind of bridging that gap.
Oh, Jars of Clay's in there? The whole band, or Dan Hasseltine?
Well, Dan Hasseltine was the main voice of that.
Okay.
But they each had something to say. And I'm trying to think who else. It was a really wide roster. But then some people really
David Leo
Schultz. Ashley Cleveland.
Andrew Peterson.
Yep.
Did you say Amy Grant?
Yeah, Amy Grant wrote the foreword. Yeah.
Okay.
Which was a main contribution.
Are you kind of like an editor of it, or is there another editor?
No, I had editors.
Okay.
Oh, goodness,
yeah, right.
I had editors,
But did you write one chapter of your own, or several?
No, I wrote probably 30 of them.
Did you really?
I mean, it's my authorship.
Right. Okay.
But there's some strong editing on the front end of me collecting. Like I had conversations. That's why it's called Spiritual Conversations.
Okay.
Their chapters were born from conversations we had together.
I see.
Those were then transcribed, and I would usually compile that into a chapter. It doesn't look like Q&A; it just is their voice because it is their voice. But I was inspiring it by saying I was really digging into their rich, readiness. A couple of them are really astute writers and really wanted just some prompts and then wrote something. And, of course, that was more than allowed. Like the Andrew Peterson one in there, who would be one of the main contributors in our day and time as far as carrying Rich's legacy. Yeah. His is in the shape of a Q&A. So we did a so it's a conversation, and you see my question, you see his answer. So you see how that conversation goes. There were 3 of those that kind of bookmarked the 3 sections. Andrew Peterson, Shane Claiborne, who's a major theologian in a simple way in Pennsylvania, worked with Mother Teresa a lot, and then a couple of the execs, Don Donahue and Mike Blanton, who of course I wanted a little industry angle, a little history, So they do a Q&A too.
It isn't just like, hey, you write a chapter. You've kind of pieced.
Oh my gosh, this was. I mean, we call everything we complete a labor of love, right? But this was a labor of work. I mean, I loved it the whole time. I love the end product. I think we got somewhere that's really cohesive. It has a lot of elements, but yet it reads like a book. That's what took the work, because there's a lot of components coming in, some different voices coming in, and filtering all that. So I think the rich aficionado will really, really dive into it, because there's also people like David Mullins, David McCracken, et cetera, who are really specific to the rich legacy. But then I think people who are coming in on the surface, maybe Amy's forward, maybe Andrew Peterson fans who actually know that Andrew's a big Rich fan, but don't know a lot about Rich, or whatever. People who respect the work of Jimmy Abegg, and so they're picking it up. So Jimmy contributed too, which, tender, loving Jimmy, doing his own projects and yet contributed to ours. So, yeah, I think it's a really comprehensive conversational work, being something that you can enjoy to read. There are spiritual insights. We sectioned it into 3 sections that I believed Rich's conversations in his lifetime, that he was inspiring, the conversations I believe that he was perpetuating. First one the section is called Love Alone. Subtitle, The Gospel of Belonging. And I think before inclusivity was ever even a thing, Rich was inclusive. And I mean that in a much broader term than political terms, or any one group or segment of society. I think Rich really did want to know what it meant to love people. I don't think he didn't struggle with that. I think he wanted to know. Then the second one is called, I've forgotten, but the idea is relationship versus religion.
Okay.
And so the idea is that Rich really was seeking people before some kind of organized religion, that his religion must be informed by his relationships with people, because that's, I believe, where the Spirit and Jesus is coexisting with us. And I believe that's what Rich was saying, and I very much agree with him. So I was able to write from an authentic place. Then the last section is called Troubadour, and it's called The Road Home or something like that. Now I'm forgetting. But the idea is, in some ways, Rich was obsessed with eternity, obsessed with what the next life looks like or how this life extends into the next. Some people, a lot of people very close to him would even say they were not, though they were deeply impacted by his untimely death, they were not surprised that perhaps his kind of fiery way of life and obsession about the eternal couldn't help but be remedied by home sooner than later. Like, who knows?
Yeah, right,
I mean,
right.
he could have just worn a seatbelt and that would have, he'd still be here probably.
Yeah,
so there's also that,
Yeah.
So it's the humanity mingling with the eternal at all times, and I think that's what Rich provoked us to do. We want to continue to provoke people to do that. I hope this book continues to provoke people to do that.
Yeah. Are there any? I've heard a rumor that there's some lyrics that were not previously published that are put into
That's
the book.
true.
Is that true?
There's 4 lyrics that Rich began and was throughout the process. They were completed after he died.
What does that
by
mean?
Phil Nash and Lowell Alexander, who are 2 main songwriters in Nashville who knew Rich, and one was on a songwriting deal
Were they
with Rich.
completed years ago, or they completed?
No, they were completed. Well,
or like recently.
More recently is when they've been made known, but I think it was a while back when there was kind of this idea to maybe put some new Rich songs out there.
Okay.
And so they needed to finesse some things, complete some things from Rich's original demos.
Were the lyrics from something way earlier? Are these
Yes,
early songs?
These are older demos, yeah.
Oh, interesting.
And there's some, I don't want to say controversy around them. There's some criticism around them.
Can you speak to that?
Yeah, and I think that's okay because I think that gives the conversation. I felt okay including 4 of them in the book because they helped section the book.
Okay.
And honestly, I think the lyrics feel true to Rich. I say this knowing that this may not come across exactly right, or someone may question my allegiance to Rich. It's not true. I think he was a phenomenal songwriter and artist, all that. But anyone who worked with Rich, and I know this from all these conversations, willingly said, come on, every song wasn't great.
Sure.
Even on the records.
Yeah,
there's
sure.
some that we kind of rack our brains about, like, what was that all there for, And
Right,
there's
right.
this greatness. And I think Liturgy Legacy actually caught a more comprehensive, great Rich. And I think that's why we're all drawn to that record. So these lyrics, I think, I definitely hear Rich in them, of course, and Rich is on the demos singing them, but some of the tweaks maybe that the co-writers made, the demos of them that were then perpetuated to see if there was life in them were made a little bit like mid-90s CCM demos. And so I think that's where some of people's first point of entry with these is those demos. And the demos don't reflect that more Americana, raw Rich that we're really wanting to hear, whether Rich was that or not. That's what we want to hear. So I think there's something kind of charming about that it's not exactly right. And I also think it kind of is Rich. Rich would really pander to commercialism sometime. We have to admit to it.
Actually, that's an interesting question. I could have a whole podcast on that question.
Sure.
But we can't go into that right now.
You can ask.
But that's a really good question. Sometimes he wanted to create the good Christian song that would fit on, maybe, if not on radio, at least it would be like a good...
Come on, he had some of it naturally in him. He
just
wrote
in him,
several Amy's biggest hits, and that was when Amy was still solidly in the Christian market.
Yeah.
She was the poster child.
Yeah.
And he wrote those hits. That'd be like writing a hit, for Mercy Me today, or Casting Crowns. I mean, God forbid, or whatever, Natalie Grant. So it's like, well, there's some permission for that. Why can't he be that songwriter and also be Rich Mullins the artist? I actually have way more appreciation for someone who is willing to be a part of a lot of conversations. I've never been one to feel very exclusive, like this is my thing and this is the only place it goes and I will protect it at all costs. Well, art, that's getting into art for art's sake, and that is an exercise in self-pleasuring. And I do not think that's communal. And I think Rich was communal. His whole life showed it. He lived in people's attics. He gave his home to a lady who still lives in it in Nashville, the only home he ever bought.
Yeah.
He lived, on the reservations. I mean, come on. I think he was really interested in people from different walks of life and probably fascinated by people who were a lot more successful commercially than he was.
Yeah, even though, to me, it's always the push-pull. I love it here, but I got to get out of here. Like, so he moved to Wichita, right? So he couldn't take it
Yes,
anymore.
and he specifically, Mike Blanton told me at reunion, said that they wanted to make him kind of this Phil Collins in the CCM world. They wanted to have the trajectory Amy had because they worked it for Amy and they worked it for Michael, and it was working. And at that time, even on reunion was Kathy Tricoli, and Kathy Tricoli was making huge strides in mainstream music. So they really saw this, like their camp was really making it work. And Rich had the possibility, and Rich explicitly said no. So there is that.
Yeah.
Rich said no to that.
Yeah.
But he said yes to this, and he said no to this, and he said yes to this. And that's where, I told you this earlier, where Amy Grant and Ashley Cleveland gave me the best advice about Rich when I was starting the book writing process. Because I felt the weight of it. I felt the weight of all the different voices who've weighed into his life and legacy, knowing that some of those voices would not be heard explicitly in this book. I felt the weight of that, the burden of that, some of the sadness of that. But I also knew that that's what you do when you steward something, is you do it to the best of your ability. So Amy and Ashley both said at different times, not at the same conversation, and I greatly admire and respect both of them. Not because of their artist careers or anything, but because the words that come out of their mouth seem to always be genuine, thought out, and authentic, and intelligent.
So what was the advice? Yeah.
The advice was, Andrew, as you go through this process, a lot of people will tell you they knew Rich best, or they were Rich's best friend, or et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. They said the fact is none of us knew Rich, but we were all deeply impacted by Rich.
Right.
So in that way, we did know him. But no one had the corner on Rich. Mm-hmm. No one has... They have pieces of him, maybe, but this mosaic that is Rich, you really have to just be willing to kind of open yourself up to, and you'll find it in a lot of different places, and some of it will even seem to contradict one another. This Rich seems to contradict this one. Sounds a lot like a natural, complex human being who needed counseling. Like the rest of us,
That's a question that's come up a time or two. Is could he have benefited from some counseling?
And I don't know that we know that he didn't. I don't suspect that he did.
Yeah.
And he probably had people who helped counsel him.
Yes. Maybe in the less formal settings of counseling. I'm sure he had counseling.
But I think professional counseling would help anybody.
Exactly.
I've been in professional counseling off and on for years, and I feel a deep connection with Rich when I got to actually hold some of his journals and read some of his really personal words that we would never include in a book.
And does that get included in the book as well?
Some
of the journal entries?
We wanted some. Ben Pearson took all the official photographs, basically, of Rich, the iconic ones we know, and Ben and Jimmy are working on a really beautiful photo book. So those were kind of taken.
As part of your project, or their own project? Yes, of course.
So we were able to use one for the cover that was manipulated for the cover in a really beautiful way. But we needed more candids, more conversational type photos. Mm-hmm. And that was pre-digital era. We were trying to find them. And David McCracken, God bless his soul, he came recommended to me through several people, and someone whose voice I had not heard on tape a lot about Rich. Come to find out that's David's story to tell, but it was because of the deep relationship they had and his really inability to speak about it for a while. So David's become a friend. And David came over the first night to my house and laid out these just pictures upon pictures and handwritten lyrics, and we were like, oh my gosh, can we use these? Because the handwritten lyric, we needed Rich in the book, in that way. So we found a gold mine from David, but there were some things we would never reprint because it...
Too personal.
And it doesn't behoove the book. There's nothing salacious or anything. But what's the point? And but it helped me get some context around some things that I think I was wondering about. And you kind of want Rich to remain a little bit of a mystery. Everyone does, that's part of his allure. So, but point is, reading some of those, I felt a deep connect with Rich. Some of, I think, his struggles, some of his tensions in his life, and I would say counseling has deeply benefited me. So that's how I can answer that. Now, I would not say I'm rich by any means, blah, blah, blah. I am not making that direct correlation. I'm just saying...
We only need a little bit of help.
A bit of the spirit, and the spiritual torture he was in some ways, the way he kept himself in it.
Yeah,
I feel a bit of that. So
we can get into that another time.
Yeah.
Quick question about the quote unquote controversy. Is it because some of Mullins' lyrics have been finished? Is that the controversy?
Probably some purists don't like that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I would say that's what it. I don't. And I say controversy is a strong word. I think criticism's right. I think some of the critical nature is just about who are these, why these guys? Like, I think if Jimmy Abegg had finished some of them, or one of the Ragamuffins, then maybe there'd be
a little bit
less of
different,
that. It was a little bit. I mean, these guys are dialed-in writers, Phil Nash and Alexander. While they worked with Rich, I don't know if I'd been in charge, I would have selected those songwriters, even though I think they're great men and great songwriters. You know what I mean? It's just, but this is you're getting into purist territory now, because we have enough time and distance between it that we now don't have Rich's voice speaking into it what to do.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Tolkien at all? Mm-hmm. So you know how his son has come along and refashioned a lot of Tolkien's work. To me, it's a matter of who's going to do it, who's the person, and then because Christopher Tolkien knows his dad, has all the archives. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. It's a good question. If you're going to do something like that, it would have to be the right person. But I definitely
But who? Yeah.
But who?
Because he doesn't have children, and David Mullins, I don't think, is the one who his brother would want to do that.
Yeah.
No. But
anyway.
But it was a thrill to have his family. It was a thrill to have Dave Mullins' blessing on this.
Yeah.
I asked him specifically if that was the case. We would have continued in the book. I don't know if we would have continued without his blessing, but the point is, it was an easy blessing. He and I have only had a handful of conversations together. He's coming up for some promo stuff we're doing around the book, and I think he has a pastoral heart. I think he's a gentle person, and I think he's, ironically, what Amy and Ashley were warning me about, he's the direct opposite. He does not try to, I feel like, control Rich's legacy. He does not say that he's got ownership. I feel like he's just honoring his brother. And he and I talked some if you pre-order the book
Say a little bit about that.
You can pre-order the book. It comes out September 5th everywhere, but if you buy it before then through Winds of Heaven, StuffOfEarth.com, which will send you to different portals. You can buy it on Amazon, Lifeway, whatever. You come back and you put in anyone who's bought it at those retailers can put in their code, your confirmation receipt. And there's a download package just for pre-buyers. And that includes a 50-minute sit-down I had filmed with Dave Mullins, specifically about
50? 50?
50.
50, cool.
About his legacy and different things. We talked some about.
That's wonderful.
About him. How do you feel 20 years later, and do we still talk about this and whatever?
Cool.
Brandon Heath did he and I did a version of the Creed that's just acoustic. It's not epic. It's mandolin, acoustic guitar, and piano.
Yeah.
But that's the only place you can get that. You can get the first several chapters of the book, and then some really cool rich quotes that they've put into prints that I think are really cool. So I think it's a worthwhile. You don't pay any more money for it,
cool.
And you're one of the first people to get it. So I would encourage people, Winds of Heaven, StuffOfEarth.com. And we want to continue the conversation, and I think this is one piece of that possibility.
Very cool. Well, thanks for
talking
to us about it.
Yeah. My pleasure. Maybe we'll have more to talk about in 2018.
Yeah, it's like the next year or so is it's the year of Mullins.
Yeah. So, thank you.
Yeah.
So thanks again to Andrew Greer, and thanks to Dave Trout for inviting me to Escape to the Lake. Honestly, people, check this event out. Whatever is going to happen, it's a year away, but please check out Under the Radar or UTR Media. Actually, stay tuned to UTR Media because they have a lot of things that are going to be announced in the next couple of weeks. They are relaunching their podcast. So anyway, I'm incredibly grateful to Dave and to Andrew for his time. Now, Joe, we wanted to offer a little bit of reflection on the Winds of Heaven, Stuff of Earth book. Now, I want to help promote the book, and so I'm not going to be overly critical, but you do have some reflections, something that you wanted to bring out from what you heard in the interview.
Well, and again, I don't want to be overly critical either because I've seen the book and I like it. Yeah. I mean, I genuinely don't, have a lot of issue with the book. I think they did a great job on it. It's going to be a book worth having on your bookshelf. So
yeah.
I'll get that out of the way first. The one part of the interview, maybe I'm one of the people that he kind of called purists. The song lyrics, we do know though. I think he said that they were unfinished works. I'm trying to remember exactly how he worded it, but he sort of implied that those songs were not finished and that they had songwriters come in and finish those lyrics that were sort of incomplete.
Yeah.
We know that that's not exactly the case because those are songs that were from the Beth Lute's early music.
Mm-hmm.
And so the reality is the songs that were altered in the book were actually finished songs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you could argue that maybe they weren't some of Rich's best songs, but they were finished.
Mm-hmm.
So I would sort of maybe fall on the purist line there, that disagree with him a little bit on that. That said, we're talking 4 songs. There's, close to 300 pages in this book.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very, very minor criticism of an overall pretty good book.
What's interesting, he said it really quickly, but Greer did say, you know what, why were these particular guys, well, it was Phil Nash and somebody that I can't remember, but he was kind of like, why these guys? So even Greer, it doesn't look like Greer had much of a choice in the matter.
And we should say that Andrew Greer, it's not like he hired those guys to finish the songs for this book. That was done, I think, several years prior.
Yeah. So it is what it is, and sometimes things just happen, I guess. Yeah, meh, okay. Yeah.
A very minor criticism. I don't think it takes away from the book overall.
Yes. So I'll just put this out there. You would probably want to put me into the quote unquote purist camp as well. I fall into that category, but it is what it is. It was interesting to hear that a peek into what the tribute album could become. It sounds like, and he was leaving a hint. It sounds like they might do a hybrid of, they take some of these old Mullins songs, and then they, like they did with That Where I Am There You May Also Be, they'll link it into a new recording. So it might be a duet with Mullins and Andrew Peterson, or somebody like that. Now,
which is interesting because that's sort of, along the lines of what Jimmy told us they were talking about doing for the Be Gods project as well.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that?
If it's done in a tasteful way, and it's done sparingly, if it's done just a little bit, I'll be okay with it. I think a whole album, that would be overkill to me. But maybe if it's like 2 songs or something like that, then okay, it's
What I think worked on the Jesus record with That Where I Am There You May Also Be is that they only did it on the one song, and it closed the album. And I thought if they would have tried doing that, with every song or even 2 or 3, I think it would have been overkill.
Yeah.
I think it worked because it was the one.
Yeah.
So I agree with you on that. I'd like to, I don't necessarily have a problem with them doing that. I hope it's not overdone, and I do hope that they stay true to the original song that was recorded by Rich without changing it too much.
Yep, I hope the music stays. I hope they're faithful to the music for sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, a couple of other little things that I picked up on with the interview. When Greer talked with Amy Grant and Ashley Cleveland, they said that no one has the hold on his story or on his legacy. So I'm just curious. I wonder, what he might be referencing there. I'm just curious, who thinks they have a hold on his story. To me, there seems like there's a story behind that I just didn't have the chutzpah to ask him, and I didn't ask him after the interview either.
That's an interesting question, and not one I couldn't even speculate into. Even if that was implying that there was somebody that felt that they had a hold on the Rich Mullins legacy. Mm-hmm. I think there have been attempts to hijack Rich and his, quote unquote message over the years. Mm-hmm. But for me, I have a much bigger problem with the people that are having. If there's anybody that has a hold or is keeping Rich Mullins' legacy hostage, I would say it's the people that are not allowing his music to be reissued.
Yeah, right. That's a big issue. That's a big issue. That's a bad pun. That's actually a really good point. I would say this, as far as the book is concerned, there are so many people that contributed to the book, so many. I do think it would have been much better that Beth Snowlitz would have been given one of the chapters. I'm talking 4 or 5 pages. That's all it would have taken. I don't fully understand why she was omitted from the story, especially since she was gracious enough to give the music to him. Just saying.
I agree with you on that. And the one thing about this, aside from, and I'm just going back from memory, so if I'm wrong, forgive me, but aside from David Mullins, I think pretty much everybody in the book was really sort of from the Nashville years and on.
Yeah.
And I don't know that, I mean, I think that largely the people that were spoken to for that book were people within the industry.
Yeah, for sure.
And Beth is no doubt an outsider when it comes to the Nashville music industry. I agree with you. I think it would have been a nice gesture. I don't know that it was intentionally meant to be a slight. But yeah, it's a good point.
Hopefully we'll be able to get Beth's stories into a larger audience at some point.
We'll write our own book, Chris.
There you go. Now, here's my last point. If you have something else, you can bring it up too. Here's one of the more interesting... Well, there's 2 revelations. One is Reed Arvin co-producing or helping, however we want to put that. That's a big deal.
Man, that was a big scoop right there.
Yeah, that's very exciting. I can't imagine how... you could tell Greer. He's just like, man, I'm getting to know Reed Arvin. Like he was just enamored. He felt honored.
Oh, and you know what? Greer scared me.
What he
actually, because initially I was like, wow, Reed Arvin coming out of retirement doing this record. This is awesome. Mm-hmm. And then he brought up the fact that of what Reed told him that, man, the last album I did was Liturgy. Mm-hmm. And you go, oh, man, maybe he shouldn't do this.
Yeah, right.
Like, to come back 25 years later and make a follow-up to that.
Yeah.
That's a tough act to follow.
It is.
So this is, I bet you this is somewhat daunting for Reed Arvin. But what I will say is that, having the under the radar, the UTR backing of this record, having tapped Andrew Greer, who's an extremely talented guy himself, Andrew Osenga, who is a phenomenal producer and musician and artist in his own right, having these people at the helm, co-producing with Reed Arvin, I don't think that Reed Arvin could have asked for a better team backing him to sort of make his Rich Mullins comeback project.
Yeah. All I have to say to them is, if you can win me over to your tribute project, then they will have succeeded on some incredibly high level.
Yeah, if you can even get Chris to even bother picking up a copy, then you've totally...
Yeah. That's right.
And you know what? One thing I will mention was I thought that, and you and I both, I think, agree that Greer's thoughts on the Brothers Keeper album really have me itching to discuss that album. Because I think you and I both sort of disagree with him a little.
Yeah, we all know it's rough around the edges, but I really like Brothers Keeper, and I know it's not as produced as Liturgy or even several of his albums, but it's a great album. It really is.
So but this has inspired me to challenge them with their tribute project.
Okay.
They've got Reed Arvin tapped to co-produce this record. What I want now is I want Reed Arvin's Brothers Keeper.
Oh, so you mean like the tribute album should just be the Brothers Keeper songs?
It should just be the Brothers Keeper album redone how Reed Arvin would have done it. Actually, hey, you know what? Forget doing a tribute album. Let's just wipe the backing tracks. Let's take Rich's vocals. I want to hear Reed Arvin's version of it.
I cannot agree with you more. That's let's do it. Let's George Lucas up. We're gonna George Lucas Brothers Keeper. Special edition. Special edition Brothers Keeper. The Reed Arvin edition. Yes. That's wonderful. Great. I think it's great. I agree with you fully.
All right. Let's make this happen. We'll start a Kickstarter.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. Okay, my last point, and I think this might be the biggest revelation of the Greer interview. And I don't know where Greer got this, but it seems like this seemed like he was saying something that was said about Mullins in the 80s, which was to make Mullins into a Phil Collins of CCM. That's really interesting to me.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way, but it it puts those first two albums into some context, doesn't it?
It really, yeah. So if you go listen to some Phil Collins solo albums, which I have two on vinyl, by the way. I have two Phil Collins. I have No Jacket Required and Face Value. What is it called? Yeah, whatever they're called. I have those. Yeah, listen to them, and you can hear
I was more of a Genesis man myself.
I was too, actually. But yeah, the Phil Collins solo stuff came later. Oh, I was a big Genesis fan. Big Genesis. Okay, season 5 of the podcast, Genesis.
So it's Carmen, it's Delirious, Billy Joel, and Genesis.
Yes. We're just giving away all our secrets, but no one's listening, so it's okay.
It's all good.
But yeah, if you listen to those first two albums, you really hear, okay, so yeah, this is some kind of, they were going for that tight 80s pop sound. They really were. And I don't know, that just really, that put something in perspective for me when he said the Phil Collins to CCM thing. So, yeah, there you go.
And interesting that they would title the book after the album where essentially Mullins said no.
Yeah, he changed his sound, right? Yeah.
There's still a little bit of it there, but it was a drastic change in sound from Pictures in the Sky to Winds of Heaven.
It was, yeah. Yeah, it was. Well, there you go. Any other reflections, Joe?
No, just want to tell you, man, it was a great interview. I enjoyed it. I know our listeners, I'm sure, did. And, the book, totally going to be worth checking out. But, man, I'm even more excited about what they're going to do with this tribute album.
Yeah, let's see.
Kind of thrilled to see what happens there over the next few months, and we'll keep everybody posted.
Yep. So, thanks for listening to our bonus episode. Again, if you feel called to come to the Window Rock concert on September 16th, hey, find your way out there. You can drive or you can fly, either way. Actually, if you fly, you probably will need to drive anyway, right? The closest airport is Albuquerque.
It's 2.5 hours. So, yeah, you're going to fly in and then you're going to drive in.
Yeah. You could rent a horse as well. I don't know if that's recommended, but, it's possible. Anyway, so if you feel called to come to Window Rock, please do. But also if you feel called to support this project and to support what Joe's putting together, it's really a lot of work to put on an event like this of this scale. And so he does need some financial support. So please check out BetweenTheSongsPodcast.com and click on the Support the Window Rock Tribute event.
Yep, all the information's up there, and we hope to see you there. Come on out for our live taping of the Between the Songs podcast. It's only going to be 6 hours long.
Yes, that'll be the edited version. So, thanks again for listening, and you will hear from us soon with another bonus episode. Thanks again for listening to Rich Mullins' Between the Songs podcast.